In the department I was assigned to, there was an arrogant section chief named Robert. He was overbearing, harsh on his subordinates, and practiced educational discrimination. Even at the department's celebration event, Robert's harassment towards me, a high school graduate, continued.
A high school grad like you can possibly be treated the same as me, a graduate from a prestigious university. This is good enough for you.
While everyone else was served luxurious dishes, I only had a salad at my table, which made Robert laugh out loud. But the very next day, Robert ended up losing all of his boasted career. My name is George. After graduating from an agricultural high school, I got a job at a local food manufacturing plant. I've always struggled with academics, but I've been enthusiastic about the things I commit to. Thanks to this, I was put in charge as a field leader at the plant and was blessed with good colleagues. Moreover, perhaps because I was seen as reliable and modest, I was regularly called to the headquarters, and each time, I was transferred from one branch to another across the country. The transfers included not just field positions like factories, but also sales, accounting, and human resources, a variety of job roles. Although I was tired of having to move with each transfer, my accomplishments and multifaceted perspective from working in various locations seemed to be highly valued by the headquarters. And at the age of 45, I was finally transferred to the headquarters. It's commonly referred to as a promotion. Everyone seemed even happier than I was about the transfer order, and I was thrilled that my work had been recognized. With renewed enthusiasm, I headed to the headquarters. Good morning. Starting today, I'll be joining Sales Division 3. My name is George. I was assigned to Sales Division 3 at the headquarters. However, the response to my spirited greeting was only a few muted replies. I had expected the headquarters sales atmosphere to be energetic, but it seemed I was mistaken. Then, the colleague who had responded most properly to my earlier greeting discreetly waved me over. He pulled me aside behind a partition and whispered,
George, you'll probably notice soon, but it's best not to stand out too much here.
What? Not quite understanding, I tilted my head, and he continued in an even lower voice.
Basically, don't go against the section chief, Robert. Okay?
Huh? I nodded, albeit confused. But at that moment, an unpleasant shouting could be heard from the hallway.
Hey, having the guts to come in later than me, the section chief, huh?
Startled by the loud voice, I turned my eyes wide as my colleague let out a resigned sigh.
That's Robert. He sucks up to those above him and lords over those below him, so be careful not to get on his bad side.
My colleague quickly returned to his desk.
Hey, Mike, you're always at the bottom of the performance list. Couldn't you at least think to come in earlier than everyone else and do some cleaning?
Robert, who had moved from the hallway to the floor, continued his tirade, his hefty body shaking. Alongside him, a young employee who seemed to be Mike was pale and frantically apologizing.
I'm sorry. I had to stop by the hospital this morning. I did submit a request for tardiness.
What? Are you saying it's my fault for not checking?
Robert's voice was rough as he threw the words at him. Poor Mike was shrinking terribly and kept apologizing. It was clear that if Mike had indeed submitted the request, it wasn't his fault. Instead, Robert's attitude of yelling incessantly without acknowledging his own failure to check was too much. Having quickly realized that the poor atmosphere in the department was due to Robert, I almost stepped in between them. But the colleague who had advised me earlier stopped me with a look. Remember, avoid standing out, he had said. I clenched my fist, heeded his advice, and my colleague shook his head as if to say give up. From then on, there wasn't a day without hearing Robert shouting in the department. The only quiet times were when he was away from his desk smoking. Otherwise, the floor was always tense. Especially Mike, who had been yelled at on my first day, seemed to be a particular target for Robert. Perhaps due to his lack of quickness, Robert didn't like his slow pace and was always under scrutiny, getting yelled at over trivial things. Knowing that defending Mike would only make oneself the next target, everyone in the department wore bitter faces but did not overtly act. Caught in what seemed an endless cycle of negativity, I kept racking my brain for a solution. Then one day, while working in the usual tense atmosphere, Robert, who had just been called by the department head, Thomas, came back to his desk and immediately started shouting,
Mike, what have you done now?
Everyone in the department turned around, wondering what had happened this time, as Robert was more agitated than usual. When Mike rushed over to him, Robert, with his face beet red and eyes bloodshot, yelled,
I clearly instructed you to adjust the order quantity, didn't I? Yet you, without even confirming with me, went ahead and placed the order. Now I had to apologize because of you.
It appeared that this was the issue Thomas had brought up with Robert. But I thought that was odd. Mike may not be the quickest at his job, but he always double-checks his work and hardly ever makes such basic mistakes. As expected, Mike, though pale, spoke up softly.
That's because you, Robert, told me the numbers were fine as they were and to hurry up with the order.
Essentially, the mistake was not Mike's fault but Robert's, who neither issued clear instructions nor confirmed them. However, Robert, feeling cornered, turned his discomfort into aggression and continued to blame Mike.
Shut up, shut up. How dare you try to pin your mistake on me? Apologize.
Trembling, Mike looked like he was about to collapse under Robert's ridiculous accusations. Unable to stand a painful sight, I found myself stepping in between them. Robert, this is too much. The mistake wasn't Mike's fault, right? Then, Robert glared at me for butting in.
Ha, you're questioning my methods. A mere high school grad who barely does any work, a newcomer, thinks he can lecture a university-educated boss like me.
Robert's words oozed out slowly, as if tightening around me.
Just because you're a high school grad, you think you can direct me. If you're so keen on defending Mike, then take over all his tasks from now. You got that? Don't mess it up, or you'll regret it.
Even as he yelled, Robert's narrow eyes were grinning at me. Next to me, Mike, looking pale, furrowed his brows worriedly. As he looked anxiously at me, I nodded slightly but sighed deeply inside, realizing I had gotten myself into a mess. And since this incident, it seemed that Robert had made me his new target. Defying him and perfectly completing the tasks I took over from Mike seemed to irk him even more. He began to pick on me over irrelevant things, always saying, just a high school grad. Despite this, I quietly continued with my work. Then one day, as we finished a project, it was decided to have a celebration within the department. Robert chose Mike to organize the event. Even though it was just a departmental affair, it involved a considerable number of people. It would be challenging for one person to handle. However, when I offered to help, Mike looked uncomfortably guilty and apologetically furrowed his brows.
Sorry for the delay, but this event is also a welcome party for you, George. It's okay, sorry.
No need to apologize. Though it didn't seem okay at all, I had no choice but to accept since he insisted. And so, with a bad feeling, I awaited the day of the welcome party. After work, we all moved to a bar for the venue.
This place is famous for its delicious food. Hard to get a reservation, but Mike managed to secure us a spot at the right time.
Robert, unusually praising a subordinate, chuckled in a good mood, yet Mike, despite being praised, looked rather down. And just as I anticipated, when the event started and the food was served, I was taken aback by what unfolded. While other employees had a variety of tasty dishes in front of them, all that came to me was a barely passable salad. Next to me was Mike, and across from me was Robert, who gave me a look full of contempt, while from the side, Mike sent me a sad, guilty glance. Without even a toast to kick things off, Robert began eating, smirking smugly.
Oh, delicious! This place really does have great food, but this is enough for you, right, George? After all, you're just a high school grad, aren't you? No way a high school grad deserves the same treatment as us college grads, right?
At the suddenly quiet table, only Robert's crude laughter echoed.
What's with you all, looking so glum? This department is not only incompetent at work but full of party poopers. It's tough on me, too.
While everyone glanced down, concerned about me, Robert was the only one grinning nastily, making a mess with his food. I was utterly disgusted by his vulgar behavior. Judging it best for everyone's sake to leave early, I excused myself to Robert, citing feeling unwell. Robert grimaced, unamused, but eventually, as if dismissing an insect, he carelessly waved his hand.
Oh, you can go. The sight of a high school grad makes the drinks and food taste worse. Oh, and make sure you pay your share of the bill.
I smiled thinly and replied, "All right, thank you for the meaningful time. It's been enlightening to understand what kind of person you are."
Huh.
Robert, not grasping the meaning of my words, opened his mouth in surprise. But soon, he was distracted by more food and drinks arriving, and he didn't pursue me further. The next day, as I was about to start my work as usual, I heard Robert's yelling from the hallway. But this morning was a bit different. His shouting had a hint of confusion. Just then, a colleague who had apparently passed by Robert rushed into the floor.
Hey, Robert's getting transferred to that backwater branch.
What my colleague mentioned was the name of a rural branch where it said there are more livestock than humans. That transfer was also rumored to be to a department dubbed as the dumping ground for potential layoffs.
Really? That's sudden.
My colleagues rounded their eyes in surprise. In the midst of this, Robert, unable to contain his frustration, reached his desk, shouting indiscriminately,
Hey, did any of you snitch on me? This can't be happening otherwise.
Robert, fiery as if about to spit flames, had everyone avoiding his gaze. But I deliberately approached him. Then, with a serious look, I said, "Robert, maybe you should take a moment to reflect on yourself." Suddenly wary, Robert glared at me.
You know something, huh? Hey, don't think you can mess with me just because you're a high school grad. I won't let it slide.
As he stood up threateningly and kicked his chair. The tension reached a peak, but just then, Thomas appeared on the floor. The rare appearance of such a senior executive caused a stir among everyone. Thomas walked straight toward us, glanced at the fallen chair with a slight frown, and then addressed Robert calmly.
You've probably heard about the transfer, Robert. Your repeated instances of power harassment and ethical violations have become a problem.
What?
Robert froze at Thomas's words. Ignoring his subordinate's reaction, Thomas continued in a calm voice.
There have been credible testimonies about your behavior, George.
And with that, Thomas called on me as if it were the most natural thing. I straightened up as I heard the voice and greeted him.
What does this mean?
Confused and unable to grasp the situation, Robert received an answer from Thomas.
For some time now, there have been rumors about your poor work attitude. This time, to thoroughly investigate it, we had George here join Sales Division 3 as a regular employee.
What?
Finally understanding the gravity of the situation, Robert's face went pale. Yes, before I transferred to the headquarters, Thomas had informed me of this. And yesterday, after leaving the celebration early, I went straight to Thomas and told him everything. Yet still, he stubbornly retorted,
That's absolutely baseless. Yes, this guy, this George is jealous of me, a college graduate, and trying to frame me.
At his pathetic reluctance to accept the situation, Thomas and I could only sigh. Just when we were wondering what to do, Mike, who had been silently watching the conversation, quietly handed me his smartphone.
The video in my phone captures Robert yelling at George. Of course, George did nothing wrong. Please use this as evidence.
And then Mike manipulated his smartphone and directed the playing footage towards us. This scene there clearly captured enough evidence to support Robert's harassment. Surprised to see such a timid-looking guy prepare something like this, I thanked Mike.
I've wanted to thank you for a long time. Thank you so much for defending me that time. I always intended to repay you someday.
I patted Mike's shoulder. I'm sorry I couldn't help you sooner. Thanks to you, we got solid evidence. So, Robert, it's time to face the music. Finally facing irrefutable evidence, even Robert slumped down, defeated and silent. Now that Robert's transfer was settled, and I was to take over as the head of Sales Division 3. Today, we were having a gathering not only to celebrate my promotion but also as a welcome party. Actually, Mike had suggested I want to welcome George properly, which led to this gathering being arranged. Freed from Robert's yelling, everyone was much brighter and more competent than I had anticipated. It makes sense. Constant yelling wouldn't improve work efficiency. First and foremost, respecting each individual as a person is how work gets done.
Let's toast to George's appointment as the head of the division.
Following Mike's lead, cheerful voices rose from all around. Watching each person smile, I resolved once more to listen to everyone's opinions and foster an open and positive workplace.